Hi everyone, my name's Nat and welcome to another Exceptional Individuals Thursday webinar. Every single week we deliver webinars on different subjects related to neurodiversity. Today we're going to be looking at neurodiversity in the workplace and what are some sort of strategies which can essentially help us to survive. I'm neurodivergent myself. I also have a master's in neuroscience. You're in good, capable hands. I encourage you to ask as many questions as you possibly want today. Please do use the chat and see this as a kind of an informal, interactive conversation. Today, we are going to be focusing on the four most prevalent neurodivergence: dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, and ADHD. However, it is not limited. Here's myself for credibility reasons. Big news, my TEDx talk is now officially live. So please, everyone, do watch, do share. I want to get the message spread far and wide. Here it is. This is the thing I have been talking about for ages. For those of you who do not know, I talk about the brain a lot, and I had the pleasure of doing a TED Talk. Now it is alive and well. Ooh, I'm not going to play it all now, but you can see, look how official it looks. Wearing a blazer and everything. Adrian, we record and we put it on our YouTube. We typically don't share slides, but if you want them, feel free to drop us an email and we send them case by case. Workplace strategies. It's a minefield in there. The workforce is not overly simple for ND individuals. We need to understand why and what we can do about that and what you can do about it. In a nutshell, neurodiversity is about thinking differently. Some people think significantly different. Those people will often struggle in the workplace because strategy, systems, and policies haven't been universally created from the ground up. They're normally an afterthought. But we are going to be looking at some theories that might be able to help this. As an organisation, we very much come from a strength-based approach, appreciating the whole spectrum of abilities, that yes, there are challenges, but there are also massive advantages. If we are successful today, and we plan to be, we are going to be understanding the impact neurodiversity have on organisations. We're going to be looking at different support and strategies. We're going to be covering some key concepts and making them nice and digestible. We're going to be looking how we can boost the inclusivity, challenge biases, and find some tactics. In a nutshell, we are going to be looking at the challenges of communicating in a world that speaks different to us, sensory sensitivities in a world that has its own preferences, which may not always align with us. Also, clashing cognitive and thinking styles, which can be beneficial, but if not catered for, can cause some friction. This is what we're going to be doing. I applied to Access to Work about 2 months ago. Do you know if there's a way to speed up their assessments? No, they are really slow. Honestly, 2 months, you're in for a wait. At the moment, we are having people that are about 7 months wait. I don't know what's happening with the government at the moment, but it is a bit late. You can go via us and we can speed up the assessment. But if you want to speed up actually getting the assessment, the recommendations approved, that's beyond our power, I'm afraid. Took 9 months for me, but still waiting for the recommendations. Nicola, I know, it is a real shame at the moment, honestly. My first question to all of you is, how well do you actually know neurodiversity? Be honest, are you super familiar with it or not at all? This will help me understand where I'm pitching today. In a nutshell, neurodiversity is just cognitive diversity. It's the saying, you got a brain, I got a brain, our brains are different. They're wired differently, they're created different. You know how they say no one fingerprint is the same? Our brains are like that. It's so unique. Okay, so quite a lot of you are fairly familiar, but we're going to lower ourselves in. It's worth noting that everyone has different ways of processing, but not everyone has a significantly different way of processing that can cause challenges in day-to-day life. Those people are the ones we're going to be really focusing on today. A quick definition: neurodiversity was coined by Judy Singer, an Australian, in 1980s. And essentially, it was a new paradigm, which is a fancy word for model. And it's about seeing neurological differences as natural, positive parts of being human. Over time, that idea has grown into a movement, which is saying, hey, we are valued, we are needed, we should be the drivers of our own future and success. When we talk about neurodiversity, essentially we've just got a descriptive word, having a different type of brain. We've got the paradigm, which is more the philosophical, why it is a thing, why it is important. Then the movement, we want change. When do we want it? Now. Some of the conditions which are normally associated with neurodiversity are autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's, dyscalculia. But remember, these are more neurological profiles. These are a type of characteristics that are clumped together in order to give people a starting point. Many people never get those labels. In terms of frameworks, how do we actually look at disability? We've mentioned neurodiversity, which is all positive. However, there are other models that we should be aware of. The medical model, which is the classic way of looking at disability, and essentially it's saying, hey, you see you're a bit different from me. That's a problem. We should probably fix that. It's trying to make everyone conform to a normal idea, a consistent idea of what normal and healthy is. This can be useful for certain conditions, but when it comes to natural variations in diversity, it's dangerous. Then we've got the social model. The social model is a bit more progressive. It's saying, hey, you know what? You are a bit different, but that's not your problem. The problem is society for not adapting and catering and accommodating. We should do that. Lastly, we've got the neurodiversity model, which is saying, hey, there ain't no problem here. You're great just the way you are. All brains should be valued. That's great. Another one that's worth noting about is the double empathy model, which is looking at a more 50-50 approach. Rather than putting the emphasis all on a neurodivergent person or a neurotypical person, we're saying, hey, two people think differently here. We have different forms of communication. If we were to better understand each other, then we'd be able to live in peace and harmony. As you can see, the models are becoming more and more progressive as we go along. One doesn't necessarily replace the other one. They can be used in unison. I want to know what words I didn't spell that right. What words and ideas do you think of when the word neurodiversity comes to mind? I'm curious to know, as a group, are we more positive, negative, neutral? What type of connotations do we currently have around neurodiversity? Be honest with me, okay? It's not always sunshine and rainbows. Some of you might see it as a superpower. Some of you might even see it as a disadvantage. There isn't a right or wrong answer for this. We got positive but very challenged. Yeah, I think that's true. It is a double-edged sword, as they say. It can be challenging on both points. Misunderstood, quirky, different, complex, ADHD, challenge, strengths, audio ADHD, weaknesses, inclusion, complex. You see here, it really is a very mixed bag. Some of these can be different, can be positive or negative, depending on the circumstance. Challenged, a bit of challenge can be good for you. Neurospicy, nice and positive. You get argumentative, honestly, hard life, passionate. It's interesting, isn't it, that neurodiversity, as in the kind of paradigm, is all about acknowledging success, but it really is challenging. But I would ask you, are these challenges inherently part of the condition, or are they because of the way that the rest of the world treats us? Probably the latter. There is a business case for neuro-inclusion, and I think this is really important. We should move away from the traditional way of, please help me, I'm struggling, more help, sir, where charities try to see us as a charity case and organisations make adjustments because, oh, bless them, we should probably do it because it's the right thing to do. We should change that narrative to, hey, you need us. You need diversity in your organisation. You need innovation. You need alternative ways of looking at problems. We are a valuable asset. Do not hire us because it's the right thing to do morally. Hire us because it makes sense for the business. I think that way levels the playing fields and change the narrative. Some examples of organisations which have really been trailblazing the way are ones like the British GC. Is that data security? Someone let me know if you know. I always forget what it stands for, the GC. I was once asked by a student, did I think he was autistic or did he have autism? I always thought this was a great question. You know what, Fran? That is a good question. And I think whether he's autistic or have autism or suffers with autism or lives with autism, they all have different connotations. It very much depends on how the person sees it. But it does get you thinking, doesn't it? That words have meaning. There's a quote from Beth Seisland who says, it's fair to say that GCHQ would not have been this successful organisation that it has been with over the past 100 years without neurodiverse talent, and they have made a very conscious effort to look for the different, the unusual, the alternative thinkers. Oh yes, okay, we've got the government communications headquarters. Oh cool, yeah, thanks very much, Theo and Adam, okay, Ellen, everyone who told me thank you. I wouldn't have remembered that. We've also got Ernst & Young, who has a neurodiversity centre of excellence because they value it so much in the work they do, which is like consultancy. There's official guidance by the CIPD, not related to police, that talks about the benefits. There is advantages to be had. And I would highly encourage you to look at the CIPD research, just type it into Google. Rather than going to an organisation with a problem and say, hey, I've got this, you need to fix that, go to them with a solution. And more than a solution, an advantage. Hey, if you put these adjustments in place, you are going to get all these amazing skill sets from me. When we looked at all these lovely words you came up with, yes, some of the negative ones are true. But if we support those challenges, then all the strengths that you have all listed, that is when they fully come into existence. It has been proven organizations which adopt neuro-inclusion policies are twice as likely to be more likely to be innovation leaders than their counterparts. It's a win-win. Oh, they're like the MI5, but for information. Well, that makes them sound really cool. There are challenges, and we can't get around that. But while we're going through the challenges, I want you to keep asking yourself, what is inherently part of the condition? What is due to how society treats us? We've got sensory overload. Essentially, offices are noisy. They are crowded, transport. Our brains are being bombarded with a lot of information. Because we have to sort it out, it means it can very likely get overloaded. By the time you get to the office, you are stressed and you are burnt out. This is why when a lot of us started working more remote, it was a win for ND people. Not for all of us, but for a lot of us. For people who aren't neurodivergent, can often struggle with empathy and understand, it's fine for me, why can't you just deal with it? Imagine you go to a club and the music is way too loud. You're going to have a bad time and it's going to be difficult to concentrate. It's similar for neurodiverse people who have sensory overload. And then we've got different attitudes. There is a stigma and misunderstanding on what it actually means to be neurodivergent in the workplace. I teach businesses every single day, and honestly, there is misunderstandings and low awareness. We'd like to say we are moving from awareness to acceptance. I'm not even sure we're there yet. Processes. A lot of the processes that organizations create can be really good for scaling businesses up. Unfortunately, can be really paralyzing when it comes to adaptation. You go there, say, can you make this amendment which can help my learning needs? Yeah, policy doesn't allow that. It's like the Constitution in America. It's a great foundation, but really rigid if you want to make any change. Maybe I should use the UK, but we don't have a constitution, but we have similar things. And then we've got theories, looking at organizational culture. Essentially, how can our attitudes towards our staff reflect the overall inclusion and culture? Then, which we will go into in a bit more in a sec, psychological safety, which is absolutely vital. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to speak up. And if you don't speak up, it's not getting normalized. And if it's not getting normalized, stigma remains. So you can see how it all fits into each other. Oh, question. Genuinely, are employers, in your experience, happy to make reasonable adjustments? I would say yes, but I don't think they know what reasonable adjustments are. And I think they struggle with the word reasonable because it has a lot of ambiguity to it. This is why you as an ND individual, self-advocacy is going to be crucial. And we do talk about self-advocacy shortly. But good question. Some of you may have heard of the term psychological safety. I thought it was a bit of a buzzword at first, but when you look into it, it makes a lot of sense. On this is an interactive slide. I want you to put a little pin on which matrix, like which little zone area you feel that you fit in. On the bottom, you've got your accountability. Another way of saying that is essentially responsibility. How much autonomy are you given? On the left, we've got psychological safe. How comfortable do you see? Apathy essentially is like indifference. We've got lack of apathy is lack of motivation. Accountability being responsible for meeting expectations. Right now or at work? Yeah, at work. Do this for how you are at work. Makes more sense. What this is saying here, if you have high responsibility and you don't feel safe in your environment, so you don't feel safe in order to make mistakes, you're going to have a lot of anxiety. When you say, I can't deal with the pressure, it's probably because you don't feel supported. But if you are supported and you are able to make mistakes and you have a supportive network, when you have responsibility, you can thrive. But if you have no responsibility, if they're like, oh, you are difficult, I don't know how to deal with you, we're going to give you really basic work, you're going to have no motivation and you're just going to not be engaged. This is why a lot of ND people struggle in school. Comfort zones, similar. If you are too comfy, you don't really learn and you don't push and progress. I think this model is actually quite a useful one to see how added responsibility isn't a negative thing. The negative thing is having the responsibility but not feeling supported. To be honest, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? At least most of you are quite motivated by the looks of it. And to be honest, the fact you're here today shows that you've got a good can-do attitude. That being said, what are the biggest barriers to neurodivergent inclusion at work? We know that when people feel included and challenged, there are benefits. We've seen that. But why is it just not happening? Is there anything that you've noticed which has been a big kind of red flag to why you haven't felt part of the team? My teen is ND and labelled naughty and trouble. She's bright but not engaged. Yep, that's a great example of when they're not being challenged enough. Then they lose motivation. It happens to children and adults. We've got lack of awareness, rigid policies, not offering or implementing reasonable adjustments. Yep, sometimes they talk the talk but don't walk the walk. Not accommodating for management. Reluctant to change anything. Yep, we've always done it this way. Why should we do it anyway different? Lack of understanding, rigid policies, neurotypical people are all making the decisions. Yep. Let's look at the top. We've got to have some empathy in the team. I'm high masking women, so people assume I'm not disabled enough. Yeah, you're fine to me. You don't need any help. One thing that I normally talk about is burnout. This is for ADHD, but honestly, it can work for any way of thinking. Is that you'll really focus, then you'll get exhausted, then you'll burn out, then you'll recover, then you'll recoup, and the cycle always continues. If no adjustments are made and we have to mask, essentially pretend that we're doing okay, we can do that in the short term, but in the long term, it isn't going to work for us. Do you see certain paradigms surrounding ND with certain age groups, i.e. more inclusion with younger team members? I would say younger organizations tend to have more inclusion because there's less people to have to persuade and to change the cogs. Larger companies that are more traditional, and we're talking in the thousands, it's a lot more difficult. Big companies have more money, so they're more likely to have support, ERGs, networks, a bit groups. Smaller groups are more likely to have a more hands-on approach. Medium-sized groups, they are the ones that I find are the most challenging because they don't have the resources to make adaptive changes, but they're also fully on their way with their kind of rigid systems that they've been implementing. That's just my opinion. Do neurodivergent people also experience a lack of acceptance from each other? Absolutely. The whole idea about neurodiversity is that we all think differently. Just because I know what it's like to be me doesn't mean I know what it's like to be you. Two autistic people, two separate people. Don't think there's any camaraderie. If anything, it's quite challenging even within the community. Would you say that startups are not the best place for ND people to work and feel supported? I couldn't possibly say, because for some people to have a lot of flexibility, they're very engaging, they require you to try your brain at many activities. But I know other people who like process, structure, they have really struggled with it. I loved working at a startup, but I know many friends who have found it incredibly challenging because you have to think a lot more agile. For some people, cognitively overload. Cool. Loving the questions, by the way. Oh, yes, there's a hierarchy within the ND groups because people hold societal biases even if they're ND. Yeah, biases do not go away even if you're part of a group. You'll even see minority groups. We always like to pigeonhole people. There is an irony to it. I definitely see that. Well, Theo says, big organizations also have large public footprints and an image and therefore need to publicly display EDI values. Displaying doesn't always mean that they actually live it, though. It's hard to find out that. Does it mean they apply to all the EDI values internally? Yeah, you're right, Joan. But it's worth noting that there are some rights, there are some protections. I appreciate we've got people from all over the planet. This section only refers to UK. However, if you know your own country's equivalent, please do share. I would love to know. In the UK, we have our Equality Act 2010, which is a lovely bit of legislation, which essentially has a selection of protected characteristics, including disability, which neurodivergence does count as. It means that, in theory, organizations shouldn't be discriminating, or if they do, we can hold them accountable. Disability is any condition which is long-term and affects daily life. Dyslexia, it's for life. Yeah, every day. Autism, yep. ADHD, yep. You can see why legally it counts as a disability. Part of the benefits of coming under the Equality Act is employers must make reasonable adjustments. What those adjustments are, that's a discussion, but they have to make them. Reasonable mostly means that anything that doesn't put other people in a health and safety risk or doesn't financially destroy an organization, it has to be something which is doable. If you want to look at examples of how people have fought the system and won, or maybe even not won, you can look at job tribunals, and there's many examples of neurodivergent people who have won different cases. Not recommending anyone go down the legal route, it's a bit of a pain, but it's good to know that you can. Donna says the Equality Act has no teeth. The UK government, let's read this, says that if an employer cannot offer adjustments, the employer can be let go of. It's challenging, yes, but they have to give good reason, otherwise they're liable for legal actions. You know what, Donna, I am not going to say it's foolproof. I will say, however, it's a lot better than a lot of countries. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't still keep trying to improve it, but it is actually one of the better ones I've seen around the world. Oh man, I'm currently in need of support for tribunals. You know what, it's a tough old battle, but I admire you for doing it. We need to hold organisations accountable, otherwise they'll just keep doing it. Emma says it needs updating. Absolutely, 2010, donkeys ago. In terms of getting some success, and we do want some success, don't we? We might want to do some universal design. This is saying, hey, rather than retrofitting and making something inclusive, why don't we make it inclusive from the ground up? Ableism essentially is when things are made for certain types of people and other people get excluded. Why don't we make it inclusive for everyone at the very beginning? It could be flexible desks, quieting areas. We think of neurodivergence at the start rather than an afterthought. Different person environmental fits. This could be making sure that roles are crafted to the person rather than us trying to squidge ourselves in a narrow form of job applications. And also making sure that different technologies are available without us having to request them. They are open to everyone. These are some things that you can do in companies which make a big difference. These are the type of things that you can ask a company if they currently provide. Ooh, what have we got here? I wrote hundreds of letters to employers on behalf of patients outlining their Equality Act obligations and a plan of suggested reasonable adjustments. The patients have identified, mostly employers took it on board. Well, I will say that's great that most did take it on board. That's reassuring. My manager is a lad and once said to me, everyone's a bit autistic, aren't they? Which is why I have been told work and therefore cannot ask reasonable adjustments. That lad is a bit ignorant, and unfortunately, people get mistaken. We all think differently, but we're not all autistic. Their autism has parameters. The person doesn't know what he's on about. Are there any tools such as self-tests to help someone who may be pondering their difficulties and wondering about looking into a diagnosis? There are actually, and on our website we have a bunch of characteristic quizzes. They are a good starting point. You cannot get diagnosed by an online quiz, okay? Can't happen. But it can make you think about some of the characteristics which are attached that you could print out and take to your GP. Yes, pictures mandatory bias and ND training for all people. Absolutely agree. Unfortunately, I'd love it to say that organisations are pulling their weight. They're not. This is why we do have to be self-advocates. We have to be champions of our own cause. First of all, a bit of self-determination. Never give up. The fact that a lot of you are here today proves to me you haven't given up. It can feel like the world is against us, but the second we let those intrusive thoughts win, game over. We've got to have autonomy, competence, and connections. We've got to take the lead. Doesn't mean we always should, but no, we in an ideal world, but we should. And motivations. This can aid in adjustments. If a manager isn't very clued up, could you learn? Could you teach them? Could you push for awarenesses, help create a group, be a leader in that area? I don't think everyone who is of some sort of minority group should have to suddenly take up the mantle to be the champion. But if you are in a position to do so, it's beneficial. What is your best advice with dealing with a sibling/family member who has autism? How can I help them the best? I think you should learn as much as you can about how their brain processes, not just what it is, what is autism, but why people who are autistic act the way they act. It can really help you have stronger empathy. Oh, that's not their fault. This just needs more encouragement. Knowledge is power. All right, these are all really great, by the way. Loving all the comments, by the way. Does anyone have any experiences? Amy, we do all of the things that you're mentioning in terms of access to work funding and stuff. I can't speak for others though, but I know we're a good bunch. We need better communications. You need to learn to articulate how your brain works in an effective, strength-based way. If you're such a Debbie Downer, why would anyone want to work with you? You've got to be able to sell yourself. Make sure that if you have a job confirmed, get access to work funding if you're in the UK straight away. This process is slow, but it is useful if you can get it. I would recommend using it. Just to make sure you're all listening, what is the law that protects us here in the UK? Is it the Equality Act? Is it Disability Discrimination Act? Health and Safety at Work? Or data protection? I will say though, health and safety one does also help a little bit. That one is a bit more of an outdated one, but yep, you're all correct. It is the old Equality Act. Woohoo! Worth noting. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's definitely something you should hold in your back pocket if you need to use it. For those of you who are managers or colleagues or just want to learn, what can you do? Active listening. Listening goes a long way. Fair opportunities. There is some great guidelines which can help you, which I would recommend. The CMI professional standards, where you can download their guides and it can show you essentially best practice. This is a great resource for managers. That's the CMI. I do recommend checking that out if you're a manager. Then, in terms of models, we've got Emotional Intelligence by Goleman. Essentially, this is about having self-awareness, then self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, and it all kind of links in together. What this is saying is it's using your brain and your heart collectively. You don't have to have every single lived experience in order to empathize and to make adjustments for someone. Self-awareness, regulation, empathy, and this can really help improve dynamics. Empathy is one of the biggest challenges I see with neurotypical and neurodivergent interactions. One person doesn't have more than the other, but it doesn't always align. Enabled Future offers 8 months free mental health support while you are in work. That is good. I'll check that out. Can freelancers use access to work? How does that work when moving between different jobs? Yes, you can. As long as you are earning around about, I think, £8,000 per year, which if you're a freelancer, I'd hope so, you can. As long as you have a business plan for 2 years plus, if you aren't making money currently, you can. If a freelancer, you are your own boss, so you are in charge. If you are not a freelancer, then technically the adjustments and the equipment would belong to the organization. However, in practice, most of the time, they don't care and they let it go with you wherever you travel and move jobs around. Out of curiosity, which of these kind of concepts, theories, ideas do you think would have the biggest benefit in your workplace or a future workplace? We've got here, says, how do you access to work if you are unemployed and need help to get a role? Yep, okay, if that is not for you, then unfortunately, access to work is only good for those who have been confirmed a role. Yeah, sadly. We've got universal design, which remember is about making things for everyone at the beginning. Psychological safety, feeling supported and challenged. We've got emotional intelligence, using your brain and heart together. Self-advocacy, being your own champion. Okay, nice, that's very interesting. Oh, nice. Yes, universal design is school. More and more companies, particularly ones that are currently in the process of a revamp, are using universal design. I am very much enjoying seeing that become more widely adopted. Self-advocacy, I don't think we should have to, but I do think we do need to at the moment. Emotional intelligence, it's a good old skill to have. Psychological safety, maybe that's one which isn't as well known, and that's why it's gotten a lot of love at the moment. It's worth always getting on the waiting list for access to work, as it's taken me from January to now to get my assessment. Yes, I would definitely back that up. It's better to be on the list and not need it than not be on the list and need it eventually. I'm hoping the government will suddenly fix it, but slow and steady. I'd also like to talk about intersectionality. This is a theory that overlapping identities shape oppression. What does that mean? Essentially, the trauma, the challenges that each of us face isn't the combination of one singular thing. It is a collection of our whole life experience. Your age, your religion, your identity, your orientation, your abilities, your background. All of these are going to play a different factor in terms of how you are, who you are. Simply knowing someone by a label like dyslexia, dyspraxia is just not really that helpful. When we take every element of someone into consideration, that is when we get true neuroinclusion. Personally, really like intersectionality because this isn't just singling people off. All right, just the people who are gay, just the people who are disabled, just the people who are white or black. We're saying actually this is all important. And one person with autism is one person with autism because you've got to take their age into consideration, their identity, their gender, their background, all of these things. Oh, Ben says, are there still significant delays post-diagnosis as people then wait prescription of treatment, your medication? Yeah, there is, sadly. Another theory I want to quickly share with you is this theory called change management. Essentially, it is how do organizations actually change their policies? First of all, you've got to unfreeze. You've got to dismantle the current approaches and start preparing yourself for success. Then, once your organization has melted, you start with a transformation. Then you start with restabilizing the processes. Change takes time. It is like metamorphosis. It can be shaped and remade. Again, once it is stabilized, you can restart the process again. It is very circular. It's making sure that change is always communicated and there is training to go alongside it. A lot of people who are neurodivergent struggle with change because it isn't communicated effectively. We can learn by watching others, having role models, different promotion. You might have networks, different training. For me, I think change is something I struggle with. So having someone who can guide me through the process is always appreciated. Theo says change management is not as straightforward as that. Trust me, Theo, I know. I had to proper simplify it. But you are right. There is a real lack of understanding of effort on the menopause, on ND also. Do you know what, Joan? There is, and we have done webinars on that subject. I would recommend checking out our YouTube. But yeah, more research is needed. My GP won't accept a private diagnosis as a lot of the private companies go under. Is that the case elsewhere in the UK? Yep, we actually did a talk on that, I think last week. Unfortunately, private diagnosists aren't always accepted by the NHS. You definitely have to do your research before paying out for that. To end with, I want you to pick 2 strategies or practices, theories, models, whatever you want to call them, that you think you would like to apply to your environment. Some of these we've mentioned today, some of them we haven't. Most of them are quite self-explanatory. Psychological safety, have roles that are more based on your strengths, more flexible working, maybe working at home, different types of desks, clear communication, sensory-friendly spaces, mentorship programs, accountability and support, and continuous. You'll notice that none of these have to apply just to ND people. They would actually benefit everyone. That, my friends, is how we get to real inclusion, making sure that things aren't just segregated to a select few. Oh, okay, so the winner is psychological safety and sensory-friendly spaces and flexible working. Nice. Some quick resources is internally, look for employee assistive programs. Some organizations will have programs in place like buddy systems, different benefits, which can support you with navigating this kind of mess of a system. It's also good to look at the different policies and to make sure you hold people to account. A lot of the time, you'll find there is support written down, but it isn't always known or widely spoken about. Look at some external organisations like the National Autism Society, the British Dyslexia Association, or ACAS for workplace support. These can be very useful. ACAS does a lot of work when it comes to making workplaces fair. Also look at government schemes. Again, in the UK, we have access to work, but in other countries, you may have different schemes available. If you thought today was interesting, I'd love to learn more. Check out some of our references, and you can look at different theories, different models. Honestly, it's really interesting. A lot of these are theories because they're very hard to prove, but they're definitely food for thought. Sometimes you might think, what happened if I put that one and that one together? What happened if I told my manager about it? A lot of the time, being able to quote these can give your arguments a little bit more credibility, which you may not have otherwise. Knowledge definitely is power. If any of you are interested in access to work, do check out our workplace needs assessments, and we do them, but we only do them for neurodivergent people. I really do encourage any of you who would be eligible to apply for it, even if you don't need it right this second. I put the link in our chat as well. This, unfortunately, is only available to you, but if you are an employee in the UK or self-employed, honestly, what are you waiting for? You should definitely do it. Ooh, what we got here? Do you have any suggestions for dealing with ADHD burnout? Yeah, ADHD burnout is a tough one. I think it's about self-awareness and being able to recognize when you are starting to deteriorate, start noticing those warning signs. It's very difficult to do it in the moment, but hindsight is, they say, 20/20. Once you've burnt out, start noting it down, and then the second time it happens, hopefully you'll be more aware. Obviously, there's more to it, but that's my 2 cents for now. Well, thank you, everyone. Do you have to be diagnosed to have an assessment for access to work? No, you do not. It's eligible to anyone who resonates, thanks to our lovely Equality Act. If you want to like, subscribe, and follow, check out our YouTube channel. We have lots of great content where you can check up on previous weeks. I'd love to have some new subscribers. And lastly, here's my contact details. If you found something interesting, you can add me on LinkedIn, you can drop me an email, you can go on our website for workplace needs assessments or those characteristic quizzes. Wow, what a whirlwind of an adventure. I hope you found that useful and edutainment today. Thank you so much for all the lovely, engaging comments. This has been a really great one today. Yes, Michelle, thanks. Yeah, I do have to do a lot. Change slides, questions, conduct surveys. It's like juggling, which I can't do, by the way, but I can do this. All right, thank you, everyone, for the lovely feedback. Away to watch your TED Talk. Cheers, Kelly. Yes, Megan, honestly, share my talk as well. Share it far and wide. The more people see it, the better. It's a very vulnerable talk, so I talk a lot about my personal background, but I really appreciate it. Okay, Sal, so if you want the slides, drop me an email, and I do it on a one-to-one basis, but it's better off to wait for the recording to be put online, to be honest. Just because of the way that the presentation is interactive, it just works better for that way. Already watched your talk. Oh, Joan, what a speedy person. Can you share your email again? Okay, what is my email? It's nat@exceptionalindividuals.com. Okay, there we are. All right, everyone, I'm going to end the call now, but thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and fingers crossed I'll get to see you at a future webinar. Please do sign up. Bye.